And welcome back to the Book and Life podcast. You're with Crystal McCarrington, as my pen name would introduce. But as here on the show, I'm Crystal Fleming, and I have the just absolutely amazing honor today of bringing on somebody who's not only helping the Ukraine crisis, but her books have so much to offer us from all over the years, and I think is continuing to teach us. We will learn from this particular author for decades to come, and I can't wait to talk to her. But first, as you know, the routine, we're going to have the advert from the Time Guardian Book 4 and also the advert for Rosemary Aitken's Roman British crime series. So, bear with me. The battle is over, the war is won, the prophecy complete, but life can't just pick up where it left off for Ethan. Struggling to cope with tragic loss, at odds with friends in the guard, he finds himself adrift, jumping at shadows, and sensing someone who can't possibly be there. Blaming herself for the goddess Lathina's death, Giselle swears revenge, and vilified the immortals' plan for world domination. But Giselle hadn't planned on love. And that leaves her with an unbearable choice. Should she follow her heart, or the strings of a goddess short on praise but high on expectation, who continues to pull her from the grave? As the guard and the order battle through the past and into the impossible future, darkness lurks around every corner. The fight for the world's survival rests with just one. Is it friend or foe? Who stands in the shadow? And just a reminder that The Priest of Freedom by Rosemary and I is having a portion of the royalties donated to the Ukraine crisis, and also her agent has donated her commission. So it's really important that you check it out and you do what you can to support. And we are both very, very thankful for anything you guys can do. Now let's introduce the woman herself. Someone I've been so excited to have back on. This will be our second conversation, but I can't wait because it's always great to talk to her. I'm pleased to introduce you guys all to Rosemary Aitken. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I mean, I loved our conversation last time, and I'm so excited that the listeners are going to hear it this time. We had technical difficulties last time, but this time we're all sorted and ready to go. So, I think like the first thing that I would like to sort of introduce these readers to is that you are somebody who's written a number of academic textbooks, and then you went on, you wrote a lot of historical novels under your own name before doing a series of whodunits set in Roman Britain under your pen name Rosemary and I love the fact that your style is so real. It's so touching that you can jump from doing an academic textbook, which is not an easy thing to write. It's incredibly difficult. And then, here you are writing these historical novels and then going in and doing crime. To me, it's just, wow doesn't even cover it. Like, I'm totally and utterly in awe of you. And I noticed like one of your books had just come out, a few years back, called The Blacksmith's Girl, and I found that one very interesting. So could you tell us a little bit about some of those books and the ones that you've been working on and ones that you have coming out?
Yes, of course. The Cornish stories really sprang from my family's history. I don't write about my family's history, but my grandfather was one of the 31 miners who were killed in a big disaster in Cornwall called the Levant mine disaster. And he died leaving 11 motherless children. There had been more, but there were 11 of them still living because most children, not all children tended to survive. And the mother had died in childbirth only a few months before. And my father was number 10 of those 11. He was 18 months old when his father died. And
Wow.
he doesn't, of course, remember or didn't. He would be 106 or whatever it is now. But
Yeah.
uh, I had been trying to write for Mills and Boon, like lots and lots of people, and I I did finally sell the story, but I really felt when I went down, they were closing the Giva mine, and they were turning off the pumps. And
Yeah.
I went down with my uncle who had worked down the mine, and he was so moved. He was saying, they're killing her. This is, they're killing the mine. And he was so proud of having worked down the mine and what he'd done down the mine and the fact that it was the family history. I thought, this is what I want to be writing about. And he started telling me about the way they'd lived, when there wasn't any social support or anything. It was up to
Of
the
course. Yeah.
kids to support each other. And my aunt gave up her own romance to bring up all these children. And the eldest boys were, of course, earning. Two of them were down the mine with their father, but they'd walked up the ladders and their father went up the machine, which is what broke and killed everybody.
Yeah.
And
Of
the
course.
uncle I went down with was actually there when his father's body was brought up from
Oh,
the mine. He was
jeez.
only 6. And he
Yeah.
went
I
down to
can't
find where
imagine that.
everybody was, and he saw his father's body being brought up from the mine. What a terrible thing to live with all your life. And
It
then he
must have
went
been.
down the
Yeah.
mine himself. It's just incredible, really.
Yeah.
But it was
It
the
must have been a
pride.
case of he felt no other option but to. Like, it must have been a case that, he looked at his brothers and his sisters who were struggling to eat and were struggling to survive. He must have felt a sense of, even at 6, a sense of, I have to help, I have to do something, which is incredible.
Yes, that's true. But he didn't go down the mine at 6 because one of the things my aunt did was to ensure
Yeah.
that as far as possible they got an education,
Yes, which is
which is how my
fantastic. Yeah.
father ended up as a manufacturing chemist. Uh,
Oh, cool.
because we won a gold medal for
Wow.
research work into uh, into pharmaceuticals, but the youngest children got a better chance, and
Yeah, they did.
this little 6-year-old looked after my father, and when my father was dying, he was calling for George. So I really have a
Yeah.
great attachment to this particular uncle.
And
But
I
of
I
course, a
think
lot of
your story is going to really resonate with a lot of people in Britain, because if you look at the devastation COVID's done recently, they'll understand that, horror and almost that weight of having to watch a loved one die, because a lot of them have watched it through screens, they've watched it in person. It's such a horrible thing for anybody to have to go through, never mind a child. So I think what your stories will really resonate with a lot of people that are going through similar tough times, but maybe not in the same way, but going through that tragedy.
Yes, and in the Blacksmith's Girl as well, which has just been reissued as the Cornish Blacksmith's Girl, which was what it was originally entitled, by the way.
Oh,
It's
okay.
it the one of the things I was interested in was the very, very strong Methodist background, um,
Yeah.
quite extreme Methodism, really,
Hmm.
which was very much a part of West Cornwall at the time. And it's not a real sect, the one that's in there, but I think people don't realize how what it can be. I mean, I was very much into religion when I was younger, and I have some idea of how
Yes.
restrictive that can be on your life. And so I was interested in that. And also, in one of the other threads in that story is the Cornish miners who fought in the First World War, because they had
Of
the
course. Yeah.
unlovely job of undermining the enemy trenches. And it was
Yeah.
hush hush. And they weren't allowed to wear the badges sometimes, because if they were caught, they were in for it in a
Yeah.
big way. And
Yeah. Exactly.
I think that's all the kind of hidden stuff. Everybody knows about the tin mines, but they don't necessarily know about that
No.
background, which was very much part of life.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm looking at your work here, and you've written 18 of these Roman crime series, and it
Yes.
looks as if you've just released one back on 31st of January. So tell me, like, what was it like to go from historical sort of historical novels to obviously doing a Roman crime series?
Yeah, well, it's still historical novels, of course, which tells you where my interest lies, really. And
Yeah, history. Yeah,
it all started with a short story. My then agent rang up and said, "Have you got a short story? A short." I was writing short stories. I wrote a lot of short stories at one time for anthologies,
yeah,
and she said, "Have you got a crime story set in classical Rome or Greece?" And I said, "Oh yeah, got a
hmm
drawer full, hasn't everybody?" And went and wrote one. And the guy
yeah,
who was doing the anthology said, "Oh, I like this character. It would make a series." So I
yeah.
tried to write a story, and it took me so long. But by the time I'd done it, he wasn't publishing anymore. But Hodder Headline took them on for a long time, and then Siband House took them over eventually. And now it's
Yeah.
Canongate, of course. So I've had a big change of publishers several times. But
And how does that feel? Like sort of lots of changes in publishers. Does that not like affect your writing? Does it affect your confidence or?
well, um, it was lovely being with Hodder, and it was lovely
Yeah,
being with Seven House. And I don't know what it's like being with Canongate because we've only just been taken over. But it obviously gets bigger and bigger, and
yeah,
things change. But
of course.
every
Yeah,
time I yes, it but yes, but of course Rosemary Rowe, which is Rosemary
yes.
Rowe rather than Rosemary Rowe, is my maiden name. That's the who I
I'm very
really was.
apology if I butchered that. I was doing my best there, and I thought,
No, that's
I
all right.
probably butchered it.
Don't have to know the way the Cornish pronounce their names. It's all right.
Yeah, I'm Scottish,
Rosemary
so
Rowe
it
might
it
work.
comes out wrong anyway. So
Don't worry about it.
it's
um,
weird because when I look at Shetland had mines back in the day. In fact, in Cornwall, the Shetland pony came from Shetland. You guys used the ponies back in the day. Um, and I look at the devastation of the mines that we had in Shetland, and in fact, they closed them down very, very quickly because they realized this was not going to work. In fact, they started sort of trying to get I think it's limestone, sandstone. It is sandstone,
yeah,
and we started, mining that, and it was above ground. But I know so many of the families in Shetland who maybe had 20 to 18 kids each lost so many in those mining situations, and it became almost like a hate. It was considered, the poorest of the poor were the only people that the Shetlanders let go down the mines. And then, to fish was considered a sort of a more, what we would call sort of working class. And then anybody that had farms, they were considered rich. It was a very strange setup in Shetland. And I love connecting with other people that want to keep the history alive. I feel like I'm keeping some of Shetland's history alive, and I know Shetland writers out there are keeping Shetland's history alive, but I feel like it's a responsibility for all of us to keep our own villages and our own histories alive. Do you feel that too, or do you feel like
oh, very much. Yes, very much. Although I've lived all over the world, they say that Cornishmen, probably like Shetlanders, are born with a piece of elastic, and they always come home in the end.
that is
and
actually very true? Yeah, Shetlanders, no matter where
yeah,
we go in the world, we
yeah,
always come
yeah,
back. It's
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I go back every so often, and then I'm reminded of why I left. um, but for me, like I would have stayed there in Shetland with my husband and had my family and raised my family. But I realized the health system in Shetland is so atrocious. It really, really is. I've never known a worse health board than what Shetland has to offer, and I realized if I stayed in Shetland, I would die a lot younger than necessarily I would if I was on the mainland. So we had no other option but to give up the dream of living in Shetland and raising our family there and move back south. And I know that there's a lot of Shetland families that's got kids with medical issues that are feeling the same way now. In fact, I was thinking about writing a novel about a young girl who's torn from the islands because she physically can't live there anymore due to her health, and writing a story about that just to maybe raise awareness in a way and kind of capture that little bit of history, because Shetland used to be fantastic for health care, and now it's not. So
Well, you're doing your bit to keep Shetland alive in your way too. I think that's very important. One thing about the tin mines, of course, was that um, for some people, it was quite a skilled
yeah,
occupation because you had to know how to follow the seam. So the people who were
yes,
leaders of the pairs, like my pair, Pare, not Pair, the team, a
yeah.
bit of Cornish there, sorry, like my
No,
grandfather,
no, it's good. Keep it going.
were regarded themselves as being quite skilled. So there was a lot of pride in the job,
Yeah,
which I think more than perhaps I'm sure it was the same everywhere, really. But they were very proud of what they were able to do. And the strange thing was that they often actually did a bit of fishing and a bit of farming as well, if they could.
yeah, of course, yeah,
I
and I
mean,
think that's it.
it wasn't uncommon for a group of, probably the same in Shetland, a group of
Yeah,
miners to own a boat between them. Nobody could afford
yeah,
a whole boat, but you could
yeah.
have a share in one. Yeah,
Yeah,
and the
and
people.
I think that's the great thing. All Shetlanders connect with people that have been involved with the ocean in some shape or fashion. And we all, it's weird, we all abide by the maritime laws. Now, this is something not a lot of people know anything about, but maritime laws is always stated that you help other people who are in trouble. You offer what food you can if they don't have anything. You offer whatever they need if you have what they don't have. And then in sort of like, it's like taking care of them. And then in kind, if you end up stranded or you end up in a bad situation, somebody else in the ocean is going to look at you and help you in the same way. Um, and that's a kind of a tradition that if you're a pure blood Shetlander, if you've got like, the fishermen in your family, they teach you this and they drum it into you like an old school drum. But I think you can take it off the ocean and you can have it here on land. Like, your community, wherever you decide to settle, should be the most important aspect of your life, so that you're helping your community stay alive and thrive. And if you have a healthy community, you don't have a community that's full of crime and full of devastation, because everybody will have what they need and nobody will be going without, and nobody will feel desperate enough to have to commit a lot of the crimes that we're seeing today.
Yeah, I
That's my
think that
thinking.
I think I agree with you. But of course, Cornwall also would regard itself very much as a maritime nation because you're not
Yeah,
never very far from the sea in Cornwall. There's a lot of crime though.
yeah, I
Um,
know. Yeah,
there's a lot of crime because there's a lot of unemployment,
yeah,
and that which was something that was never the case. I mean,
yeah.
it was hard work. It was terribly hard work, but it was work. Um,
Yes, of course.
One of the terrible things that's happened is, of course, that the fishing industry and the mining industry have just collapsed, and all people do
Yeah,
now is
that's
look
true.
after tourists, which is a
Yeah,
perfectly nice thing to do, but it's not. It doesn't have that depth of, this is what my forefathers have done for generations,
of
which was
course.
pretty
Yeah.
much the thing before. Yeah,
I
yeah,
think, and it's scary to me because I look at Shetland, and Shetland was not dealing with the same level of crime it is now. And it kind of breaks my heart because I'm thinking 15 years ago, yes, we had drugs in Shetland, and yes, we had alcoholism problems in Shetland, but we never had gangs coming up to Shetland to, collect debts, and we never had people getting their faces smashed in their own homes because of road rage. None of that existed. I mean, 2 years ago was the last time, was the first time in 50 years we had a murder. So it is breaking my heart to see that Shetland is struggling in that way, that this new crime of pedophilia seems to be a huge crime now in Shetland, and it breaks my heart to think, well, where have we gone wrong that this is now something that's a part of our community. And I just hope that, in a way, Shetland will find its way out of this mess and find its way back to what it was. But you never know nowadays, and I think, yeah, it's sad, and I feel like, your area got left behind with the government. I don't believe in this whole, they're going to upgrade us and we're all going to get an upgrade and we're all going to be made better. I don't think that there's enough money in Britain to upgrade all communities that have had huge amount of losses and had huge amount of job losses. I just don't think it's possible. And it's sad.
Neither do
It
I
makes
think
me wonder.
money is the answer to everything either.
No,
I
it's
think
not. Having jobs for people where they can work and they can feel like they've achieved something is far better than just handing them money and telling them, you're okay or whatever. They need that moment of realization that they've achieved something and that they can achieve something, they can get ahead and they can have really good incomes and then obviously give their children a better opportunity than what they've had. And until the government focuses on that, I don't think we'll see a drop in crime. I think it'll get worse before it's going to get better.
I don't know. One of the things it might teach us is to be grateful for what we have, because I think that's
Yes.
one thing that we have absolutely lost.
Yeah,
It's a
I think we've
must
absolutely forgotten that.
become.
Yeah.
It's become a must-have society. I must have this. I must have
Yes.
that because you've got it. And
Yeah,
it wasn't like
exactly.
that for our great-grandparents.
No, it's about survival.
Mm.
Yeah. And I think we've lost the love for the royals as well. I think that's taken a nosedive as well, and I think that's kind of sad because the prince was booed. He came to an event with his wife, and they've been through so much. They really have, William and Harry, and to have the crowd boo him for being there, for participating in the Jubilee, for the royals to be booed at all when we don't really have even a quarter of a clue of all the things that they do for this country and do for us, that really made me feel sad. That really did. That made me feel like, oh,
I hadn't
people
been
do not
following that
understand what they're
story.
doing.
No, no.
Yeah. No, it was all over the news, and I just thought, wow, that's such a sad thing. Such a
I think
awful response.
social media has a lot to do with this. I think people are
Yeah.
a little bit too prone to just think you can say what you like, do what you like, and you're anonymous. And so you can threaten people and say horrible things to people. And it's
Yeah,
not right
exactly.
because it's
Yeah.
only social media. It's not all right.
No, it's not. And when I worked with sort of all the young kids, my heart broke because they really believed that everything lived and died on social media. And I had to almost teach them that there was life outside of Twitter and Facebook. And it did. It was like, I honestly thought to myself, we need to educate the kids that life is more than what's on the TV or what they can see on their screens or what of any of that. Do you know what I mean? We have to honestly go that one step further and say life does not revolve around your phone. If you follow my drift,
No, absolutely it doesn't. Because I'm old enough to remember when people didn't have even phones in their houses, let alone phones in their pockets.
I know, exactly. I have a time where I remember I didn't have a mobile phone until I was 14 years old and I didn't know how to use it. I had it in my backpack and I had no idea how to use it. But when I figured out how to use it, I was bullied. I had to learn to have a tough skin. And, it opens up the door to so many horrible things. And I honestly wish that I had been older before I gotten a phone because nothing was going to happen to me on Shetland. There was no major crime at that time for me on the islands that I needed to necessarily be worried about. And I think if you live in an area that's safe enough, don't give your kid a phone. Let them grow up first. Let them develop as people before you introduce them to a world of social media and what social media means and how it takes over their lives.
Yes. And
But I must admit,
sorry.
getting back to your work, I am excited to see that Dreadful Destiny is coming out in 29th of July.
That'll be uh, A Dreadful Destiny is out.
Oh, is it? Oh, sorry, I've misread the
Yes,
year, so you're right.
it may be the ebook is coming out or something.
Oh
Yeah,
no, no, no!
it
I miss. It was
will
the
be
paperback. The
paperback.
paperback is out. Yeah, yes, it was the paperback version. Because
Yeah.
I keep forgetting nowadays you don't just release a book and it comes out in all formats. I forget that nowadays it's like they release like the paperback, the hardback first, and then the paperback. So usually a year later, the paperback
I've
comes
been
out.
publishing for 25 years and I've never known it different. They always brought the paperback out,
Yeah,
the hardback out.
unless you're indie and then everything comes out on the
Yeah, that's
same day. So I'm still getting used to
that's
that.
the old British way, you know. They brought out the paperback, and the people who hadn't got the paperback, that hadn't got they brought out the hardback, and then the
Yes.
people who hadn't bought the hardback might just get hold of the paperback. Yeah,
Well,
but they
I think for some people the paperback is less strain on us, if that makes sense. Because particularly for
to
people
some
like
extent,
me who have like really not the best muscles,
yeah.
um a hardback, if you're reading it for any length of time, your arm slowly starts to go dead and you start to get like the tingling and the pins and needles in your hands. And sometimes a paperback can be easier, particularly if you're in hospital and they're taking blood and you've got lines and stuff. Paperbacks are normally easier. But then there's times when I'm in hospital, I prefer a hardback if I can't hold the book up to my nose so I can read it. Um, I can turn the pages of a hardback and it's easier to hold it down so I can read it. Um, but yeah, I always thought it was fascinating. I wonder why it's an exact year that they wait before they release the paperback. I always wondered that.
I don't know. Perhaps
Well,
they hope more people will be impatient enough to buy it. I don't know, but of course, you see, I'm so old. I can remember when there wasn't such a thing as paperbacks. Everything was hardback, even if it was only
yeah,
cloth,
that's true. Yeah, yeah.
And paperbacks were kind of flimsy, and I suppose that's I don't know. You
Ah,
know,
I see.
you
Yeah,
used to get the cheap penguins. You know, that was the thing. And when I was young, it was all I could afford. So
yeah.
sometimes I like to buy a hardback because it's a book I really want to own forever. But most of
Of
the time,
course,
I
yeah.
buy a paperback, like anybody else.
Of course,
I'm
yeah.
not.
No, no, I get that.
Do
I
you get on
yeah,
with Kindle? I find ebooks quite difficult. I like the feel and the smell of a book.
I do too, and I have really bad dyslexia, and it's so weird because if I'm reading off a screen, the words will start moving,
Ah,
and I get terrible eye strain and sore heads, and I have to have a nap between reading sessions.
I'm going to
So
say
for
something
me, I
very.
can't do it on a screen. I can't do it on a Kindle. So having a physical book in my hand that I can sniff and I can read and I'm turning the pages, it's very relaxing for me, but it's also easier for me to read. So I think I'll always be a physical book person rather than an ebook person, which is
Oh,
funny because I was an ebook author. So,
yes,
you know,
yes, yes. Well, I guess I'm
I
either.
hate doing edits because I strain my eyes so much doing edits because all edits is done on the computer. And I kind of think I would have been a better writer in the day when, they would send you the physical edits. I think I would have been better then because I wouldn't struggle so hard with the dyslexia. Um,
Yes, I still have difficulty with editing online. I sometimes have to print it
yeah,
out. I don't see the mistakes if I'm copy
yeah,
reading. Yeah,
yep,
so I just don't see it on online. Used to be a teacher,
I
you'd
know
think
that.
I would, but no, 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 not at
No,
all.
I agree. I think it's so complicated now to edit because you've got track edits and you need to accept track edits and then you need to follow the edits. I get so confused sometimes with editing, but um, I get there in the end. I just finished a book recently and I took me forever to, I think it was like 3 years it's been in editing now. because I was struggling with the track edits. But it is edited now, and I'm waiting to hear back from a couple of best-selling YA authors to see what they think of it before I send it on to any agents or any publishers, because I just want it to be good. I want to be able to say to these people, hey, it's already been read by these big names. They say it's really good. Can we trust it? Can we go with it? Can we hopefully publish it? And it's the same because, I mean, I feel honored to get to know you. And when I finish my period novel that I'm writing, the only person I'm going to trust with it, I've got two people that I am trusting to read it. Maybe three if she's still up for it. And one of them, I hope, is you, because I want to send it to you to almost have your opinion on it from another historical writer's point of view, to read it and say, well, you really kept up the historical accuracy, or even just to hear if it's a good enough story to pursue trying to find a publisher for it, because I'm very much a freelance writer and I don't have an agent. I don't have anything set, so I would love to see it. And I am taking something personal for me. I'm doing the Shetland Bus Project, which is about all the fishing boats that used to go out and save people in the ocean, and that would go to these countries and rescue refugees and bring them back and find them safe places to live, like in Canada, or go to America, or go into the mainland of Britain, or even to stay in Shetland. They would do all this great stuff for these people, and sometimes they were deserters from the army, the German army. Sometimes they were, people from a plane that went down. Like they had this great way of making them feel safe and trusted, and like they could talk. And the great thing about the bus project is they also used it to place the spies in German territory so they could get them across. So maybe your relatives met some of mine, because they were running the bus project for most of the First World War, and I think they did it in the second. Well, they did do it in the Second World War, but I think they had something similar going in the First World War too. So you never know. Maybe our families cross paths. Yeah. But I want to do that, and there was a royal bloodline, I don't know if they were distant cousins or what they were, but there was earls that took care of Shetland at that time. And I've used them as the catalyst for all these true stories that I was able to gather from elderly people before they passed. And I'm going to really put it through him and their family, and have it so that whether it's a maid that works downstairs, or the butler, or from one of the girls' perspectives, all these stories that I've found is going to be connected into the family and connected into the Earl, who actually ends up running the bus project and has a huge, in historical fact, he did actually have a very big input into the bus mission. So I've kind of used that. So it's a bit like Scottish Downton Abbey with the action of the Second World War. So that's the story I want to send to you when I finish it.
You're on.
I'm nervous. I will be. I met you. I am terrified. Because I don't know how this is going to go. Because I'm sort of wanting to balance the history and the romance, but also have the really nitty gritty reality of the war, and reality that the upper class standards and way of life was really changed. It was changed forever. And they never went back to what they had before. So I have a lot in the book. So yeah, it's a project of mine, and funnily enough, I have dedicated it to Catherine Cookson and yourself, for being pioneers in this industry, and leading the way for a lot of other people like myself to continue on keeping the history of the world alive. She got me going, and you've kept me going, so I think I couldn't think of anybody else that it could be better suited for.
That's very kind of you. Thank you, Chris. Right.
And I just hope it doesn't suck. That's my fear. I don't want you to turn around and say, oh my God, this story's awful.
I shall tell you if it does.
Yeah, that's the thing. I know it will. And that's what I love, because I swear when Catherine was alive, I could almost imagine Catherine Cookson phoning me up and going, Crystal, this is just terrible. Terrible, terrible work. You need to start again. Like, I could just imagine her doing that. So I've kind of had her voice while I've been writing it the whole time, kind of instructing me almost in what I should be doing. But it's going to be interesting because I need to go through the editor to finish the edits. But yeah, I think it's going to be. It'll make a great series. I just need to find the right place for it. And
Okay.
I think the readers will be very excited to read it. And we've got sort of support from Nancy Revel. I don't know if you've read her work yet.
No.
Nancy Revel is a Sunday Times best-selling author of The Shipyard Girls.
Yes.
So she wrote actually very true stuff about her family that worked in the shipyards during the Second World War. And so she's going to take a look at the book and maybe give me a quote for it. And then we've got Celia Reese, who did Miss Graham's World War. Miss Graham's cookbook. Sorry, I totally butchered that for some reason. Miss Graham's cookbook, and she made her career as a YA writer, and now she's done an adult history novel which came out in the pandemic. So, I have a very big task to impress you all. So I just hope it works. But yeah, my idea was to create a very glamorous, but yet a very kind of tragic setting, and have people admire it, but at the same time realize what we gave up and what we sacrificed. And I feel like it's maybe coming out at the wrong time with Ukraine and everything, but yeah, I think it's good to remind people that we're really strong as a country and we can survive anything.
Yeah. Let's hope the Ukraine does. It's not looking good.
It's not looking good, no. But if I know them, and I know how much influence Ireland had on them, they will be perfectly fine with their warfare. So yeah. So on to the show itself. What is the book that you've read recently that stuck with you the most?
I have been reading a book called A History of Rome in 7 Sackings, which is a very odd thing
Oh,
to have been very, very interested in. But it
it is a
is,
bit, yeah.
it is, but it's history and it's Rome. And of course, that's interesting to me. But also, it's just written by a man who knows a lot about Rome. He lives there. And
Okay.
it really gets the nitty gritty feeling of what it must have been like to be actually in Rome. And I found a book about Pompeii, which I
Yeah.
have only just started, and it is actually about what they now know about the inhabitants of Pompeii. And
Oh,
oh, I wish I'd
really?
read that ages ago. It's so lively. What interests me is what brings history alive, and those
Exactly, yeah.
really, really do it for me. The history of Rome in 7 Sackings is a little bit a little bit niche, but it's
Yeah. Yeah.
but it is of interest to me,
Of
particularly
course.
the early part of it. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
wouldn't it help you with the writing of your own stuff because it's
Well,
giving you
yes,
a much more
but of
detailed
course,
insight?
of those 7 sackings, only uh, 6 of them happened after the period I'm writing about. So
Ah, okay. Yeah, that would not necessarily be that helpful then, would it? If you think on
no.
it.
But
No.
it's very interesting for putting together what happens to Rome,
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
the
No, but I
history of
think
Rome.
I just had that instant thought that must be really helpful, and then I'm like, oh wait, maybe not. Because I've had books where I've picked up and I thought this will be really helpful for my writing, and then I'm like, shoot, no, it's not. What do I do now? Yeah,
If you're writing about
I've had those moments.
200 and something AD, 200 odd AD, an awful lot of history happened after that. So,
Yeah, of course, yeah. But I had that instant moment of, yeah, that must have been really good, and I thought, maybe not. So, who, if you could pick one author and one series to read and you don't have to worry about time or interruptions or anything like that, who would you pick and why?
That's an interesting question. It would depend on my mood, I think. My first instinct would always be to say Dickens, because Dickens is just so different and there's so much of it. And he has
Oh,
just
okay.
full of so many interesting characters, and you can read him aloud or put him aside or whatever. But I think I mentioned to you before, one of the people I would, if I was on a desert island, I would love to take with me is somebody else who writes just about life, and that's Lillian Beckwith, who's,
Yeah,
and then
you
that's the
mentioned her.
Highlands.
Yeah.
I just loved her books. They're so human,
Yeah.
and
And that's the great thing.
I wouldn't go anywhere without Jane either. So
Yes,
Jane,
I don't blame you for that. I don't blame you
yeah,
for that. So
yeah.
what's your feelings on Charlotte Bronte and
Um,
those books? Are
I
you into
think they
Charlotte?
I think yes. Well, of all of them, really, I think Anne is
Hmm.
rather undervalued.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think Emily got onto a technical thing which is absolutely extraordinary, because she tells
Yeah.
the story of Catherine and Heathcliff, but she
Hmm.
tells it through the distorting mirror of Nellie, who is telling it to Lockwood. And
Yeah.
Lockwood is telling us, so we're 3 steps removed. And of course, she isn't really. And then she puts that all back. So we know that
Yes.
perhaps her testimony about Heathcliff is a bit biased. And then
Hmm.
suddenly we are confronted by the fact that all this is not happening in front of us, but it's 3 stages away. And that's terribly clever. I think she just
Have
hit on it
you
by accident, but it's brilliant.
have you read Mary Bronte? She wrote the book Self Control. She was a Scottish novelist published in 1818, and she was one of the inspirations for Jane Austen and how Jane Austen planned her novels. She also
Yes.
wrote Discipline and Emmeline. She was considering her background and the fact she was a pastor's wife and was dyslexic too. I just find it very interesting that she played such a huge role in Jane's writing too.
Yeah, no, I have heard of her before, thanks to
Yes, you
you,
heard of it from me. Yep.
but I haven't.
I will be passing you her name along at
Yes,
the end.
and it's on my to-do list, but I must admit I haven't found her yet. No, no.
She's very difficult to read. I found her very, very difficult to read because she has moments of such detailed description, so detailed. It's almost like 4 pages worth of detail, and then she goes back into the action. But you almost forget through reading the description where you are in the story.
Yeah,
But I can see the sarcasm and the wit that Jane was able to find in herself and bring it out, because I can see a lot of the techniques Jane did in her work actually was in Mary's book first.
mhm,
Um, and I just thought, wow, it was almost like reading another Jane, but with a lot more description in it.
yeah,
And that's the only way to describe it. So I recommend everyone check her out, especially if you're a Jane Austen fan, because
yeah.
she's totally forgotten. Nobody knows anything about her unless you're
No,
Scottish and you're
I
studying
mean, I
her.
even studied Jane at university. I'd never heard of it, but of course,
No.
things were very different back in the 50s.
Yes, and I mean you can actually do an updated Jane
People
Austen.
weren't necessarily looking for those things at all. But
Yeah,
the um, one of the things about Jane, of course, which makes Jane so delightful, is that she does
yeah.
have this instinct for timing. She
Oh
doesn't
gosh,
hold you
yes.
up with description.
No.
I mean, take Thackeray, and he can slow you down for
Yeah.
half a chapter while he tells you about something you didn't
Yes.
need to know. But
Yeah.
it just was in an era where people didn't have pictures to look at much. They weren't used to television. They had to be told how to construct a picture. And I'm
Exactly. And I
sure
think
that the creation of film and photographs has completely changed the way people have to do descriptions.
Yeah, and I think Jane almost learned from Mary in a way. I think
Yeah.
that was something that maybe we didn't realize is that she actually did probably learn from that book and said, okay, the description's too heavy. I don't want to have my story sort of take this long. So I'm going to maybe limit my description. So I think maybe that was a good learning curve for Jane, and with
And
what she was
um,
doing.
Jane is very good at not taking you outside the. I mean,
Story. Yeah.
uh, taking you outside the main character's head very much. So
Yeah.
she doesn't spend a lot of time describing what Emma's wearing
Exactly. Yeah.
or
Yeah.
even what Emma looks like much.
Hmm.
But you
I would
know,
agree with
because
that. Yeah.
Emma looks like you, because you are Emma.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly. You don't need to worry about what color is her skin or what color her hair is, or because you are that character for the duration of the novel, and I think that's an incredible
Yeah.
feeling and
And
thing
I
to
mean, so
be.
much so that when I sometimes see a film I saw a film of
Yes.
Emma, and I thought, but Emma's blonde. No, she's not.
Yeah.
Who said so?
It's everyone's own interpretation. Yeah, and that's the great thing about reading is everyone has their own viewpoint on books and
Yeah,
what you've
you know
written.
the
And
lady who said that she read the book and then she heard a story on radio, and
yeah,
she was losing her sight, and they were saying, "Well, you'll be able to listen to the radio." She said, "Yeah, but the pictures aren't so good."
yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So, is there an author, past and present, who has influenced, inspired, and made you excited about reading books, and then who's made you excited and felt influenced to write?
Whoops, don't
It's
know.
a very tough question, I
It
think.
is a tough question. Um, yeah, I suppose I think one of the strange things is that one of the things that really made me believe that it was possible to write was when I was a child in school, an author
Yeah.
who in New Zealand, an author who nobody has ever heard of before or since, came to talk to called Anton Vaught. People may prove me wrong,
Mm.
but I don't think anybody's ever heard of him in this country. Came to talk to
Yeah.
us. And the idea that this real person had produced this real book suddenly made the
Hmm.
idea that one could write very, very living. And I think the
Of course.
decision that I could actually write something, and maybe when I grew up, I might be able to actually write something that somebody would publish, probably sprang from actually
Hmm.
meeting an author.
I would agree. Yeah.
And I really, really think that author visits to schools and what goes on in schools is vital to the idea if we're going to have generations of people going on storytelling.
Yeah, of course. And I think it's a good way to keep techniques alive as well.
Mm.
And I get the feeling that that's being lost. And there's nothing we can do about it, but it is being lost. A lot of our skills and our techniques are being lost, and I wish that they would, I would love to go in. I have a young adult that I spent years putting together, and I would love that opportunity to go into a school and educate them about what it means to write the book, what it means to put it together, what it means to. It's not just the book. You've then got to go on and you've got to market the book, and you've got to know how to get the word of mouth out. And they do teach a lot of that marketing stuff now to the kids. But gosh, I wish they'd done it when I was a kid. But I learned a little bit from being a learning support teacher that yes, some of it's there, but not all of it's there. And I think I would like to be able to go in and educate them on things that they don't know, and that could maybe make it easier for them to know, if that
Yeah.
makes
I
sense.
think what he really had to say, which inspired me, was,
Yeah.
I can remember sitting in a school desk like you and writing stories and
Yeah.
thinking I would like to get them published.
Yeah.
I was a person just like you. If you like writing stories, you might be able to get them published too. He actually said this.
Mm-hmm.
And that was what made me think,
Yeah.
this is not like being a magician or being an acrobat. This is something that, people like me could actually do. And
Yeah, of
it's
course.
funny how it stayed with me all these years. But I've always loved the things that I look back on and think, oh, that was lovely. I like people's writings, like I like memoirs that are written from the point of view with a kind of humanity. I
Yes,
like
humbleness as well.
Dirk,
Yeah.
Dirk Bogarts and Joyce Grenfell and
Mm-hmm.
people like that. I read, well, Joyce Grenfell particularly, when I was quite young. And I thought, this is
Yeah.
magic. Look, they've taken me out of my world and they put me into their world. And
Yeah.
although I always loved stories for stories, and I used to consume great
Mm-hmm.
quantities of Agatha Christie and all sorts of people, it was that always made
Mm-hmm.
me feel this is magic. And
This is what it's meant to be. Yeah.
I didn't really read romance. I came to Catherine Cookson
Hmm.
quite late. And
Yeah.
I think there was a sort of snobism about, and I was astonished at the humanity
Yes.
that goes into those stories as well. It's the same thing. It's people taking you out of your world and putting you into theirs. Only hers was an fictional one, and
Mm-hmm.
Joyce Grenfell, for example, was putting you in a one that was a remembered one. But it's exactly the
Yeah.
same. Lillian Beckwith, the same thing. It's exactly that humanity. I want
Yes.
you to feel what it
Exactly.
was likely to be there, and these are people whom I loved. And that feeling
Exactly.
of love
Mm-hmm.
is what I have always, the warmth has been always what really, really attracted me to that kind of writing.
And what I like about sort of Catherine is that her stories were things that she'd seen, things that
Yeah,
she'd experienced, things that
yeah.
she'd witnessed, and that was incredibly important because it changed for me it changed the outlook on writing. It made me feel like we didn't have to romanticize things. And yeah, I mean, if I hadn't read her, I don't think I'd ever be a writer. In fact, I think one of my stories would be something I'd only tell my kids or my nieces and my nephews. I wouldn't necessarily be writing them, and I think that's tragic almost.
It's
So what
interesting.
genres?
I mean, I
Yeah.
bet, but she does. She writes about things that she's witnessed, but she also sometimes
Yes.
sets it in periods that she can't have witnessed. But
No,
she makes
no, but
you
she's
feel
pulled those stories from
that
someone.
she
Yeah.
did,
Yeah.
and that's the important thing.
Yeah.
She makes you go there with her. Yeah.
And she did talk to so many
Oh
of her
yes.
elders. Yeah. And she interviewed so many. And I think that was important because if she was going to write a time period, she knew everything that there was to know about that time period so that she couldn't make the mistakes that would throw you out of the story and ruin it for you. And that's a technique that I kind of drum into anybody that asks me for advice. I'm like, no, no, know your genre, and no, no, know what you're writing about, and know everything that would happen in that period if you're doing a drama, so we do not lose the magic of what you create.
It, you
Most
don't
people think
know.
I'm crazy for drumming
You
that in,
don't
but
know how true that is. Um,
mhm.
I used to go to lots of writers' conferences and things. I used to be president of the West Country Writers once upon a time, and
Yeah.
the uh, I remember somebody telling me it's not the one of the most clever things I ever heard. It's not what you don't know that
Mhm.
catches you. It's what you
Yes.
think you know,
Yeah, exactly.
what you assume that
Exactly.
you know, and
Mhm.
that's where you can make the mistakes. Like I always
Yeah.
remember P.T. James actually saying in one of her novels, she had a motorbike go backwards, and it didn't occur to
Okay.
her that it couldn't.
Yeah, I mean, there is some that can, but
Yeah,
yeah.
but there's one that will. I think it's a Harley Davidson, and she had to
Yeah.
change it so that she actually nominated that it was this kind of motorbike because somebody picked it up that you couldn't do
Yeah,
that.
and then it had to, yeah, yeah, and it
Yeah,
starts a kind of craze
and
of wanting
somebody
to
else
prove everything wrong.
wrote about writing about a farm where they were going to spend all their money to buy a bullock or something. I think I've got
Yeah.
that right. And a bullock is actually castrated, and that wasn't what they wanted. They wanted bull.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, but there could have been some humor to that if you think about it. If
Yeah, of
she'd
course
gone
there is. But
with it, yeah, yeah,
if you don't know and your editor doesn't know,
yes, exactly.
somebody's going to read that and think, "You what?"
Yep, somebody's fucked up. Yep, yep.
So if
I
I
know.
put,
I've been pulled up for
I
things
mean,
like that
one
too.
thing about writing about Roman Britain is that nobody knows, so that's all right.
No, you get away with a lot more. Yeah, yeah.
Play with an
I
awful
like
lot more.
that.
And if you find a
So when
pool of blood, nobody will know whether it's a person or a rabbit. There's
exactly,
no way of knowing, um,
no,
and they had no way of knowing. And telling a
exactly,
first person narration, nobody can know what my narrator doesn't know. So that's very
exactly.
helpful for crime. But
And it lets you get away with a lot too, if you think about
yeah,
it.
yeah. Well, of course, because if you're telling the story from a remote point of view, the author knows everything or can do.
Exactly.
If
Yeah.
you're writing through his eyes, you can only know what he knows.
Yeah, which is problematic at times. Yeah.
Yeah, but
So
it's
when
wonderful. I'll tell you this. It's a stupid story, and you can shut me up. But um,
no, no,
I have a
don't go ahead.
wonderful way of creating a murder in Roman Britain, because
Ooh.
they used to keep sugar crystals. They used to keep sugar crystals and put them when they weren't proper sugar. They were actually made of mercury, and they would let it.
Oh,
They would put wine into a mixture, and it would make little crystals, and they were sweet. And
yes.
you could put them on things and eat them, and they
Oh
were poison,
no.
of course. So if you ate too
Yeah, of
many,
course. Yep. You
but
die. Yep.
the trouble is, you can't use it because they didn't know that.
True. True. True.
So,
Yep.
so you have a wonderful method of committing murder that you can't possibly use because
They didn't know.
they
Yeah.
didn't know. Yeah.
And how would you prove it was murder as well?
Well, it couldn't be
That's the
murder.
hard part. Yeah.
It could only be accidental death, which isn't very interesting, really.
No, it's not. But you could almost have that as a twist in some sort
Yeah.
of way, because
It
you
might
could
be
say,
quite
"Oh, this person was murdered," and then
like a Roman reenactment and have somebody do it that way. Because
yeah, but
they've
you could have
done
it
that.
almost like they suspect murder, they suspect murder, they suspect murder, and then somebody's witnessed that they've been sitting eating these sweet things, and then suddenly died, and then you could make that as a very good twist in one of your
Yeah, but the
novels,
trouble
because it
is,
wouldn't be
nobody
expected.
would have known what killed them. So, no forensic science. If you died, you died. They might spot
Exactly.
you were poisoned, but they would never have guessed it was that.
Exactly. So when you go to a bookstore, where would you say you're drawn to first and foremost? Where's your number one place to look at books? I know that you're more at home, so if you were to order a book online, um, what genre do you look at first? Do you browse, or do you just go on and order what you're looking for?
Uh, Depends. I
Yeah.
spend quite a lot of time looking at catalogues,
Ah, okay.
and I tend to. My first draw is always to non-fiction, but
Yes.
sometimes I will see a review of something and think I'd like to read that. But if I
Yeah,
go into a
reviews can be
second,
helpful.
if I go into a second-hand bookshop, I look at crime
Okay.
always.
Obviously. Yep.
Yeah, not necessarily though. I don't like noir crime. I don't like horrors.
No,
So
no.
I'm
Some
more
of it is a
golden.
bit rough,
I'm
yeah.
more golden age or cozy or intellectual crime, really.
Yeah,
Um,
cozy's good and safe, yeah.
yeah,
Well, ish.
yeah.
Ish.
I'm not exactly cozy, but I don't like violence for the sake of violence. And it's crazy
Exactly, yeah.
when I write crime stories with murders in them, but actually I'm not really interested in the murder. I'm interested in the motivation and the people and the way of life behind it. So that's really where I'm at. Um,
It's just a really historical book, but with kind of a murder backdrop
hang
is,
on that
a good
block.
way of putting it.
The road,
Yeah.
in a sort of sense, I want to try and do what we were talking about before. I want to take you back there and say, what would it actually have been like? And actually, they're not
Yeah,
that different from us. As people, they're not as different from us. And people say to me, but oh, what about gladiators? And I say, when did you last watch a war movie where everybody got shot?
exactly. I would love to see you sort of dive into kind of like go into the English history a little bit before all this sort of industrial boom and Victorianism and stuff like that. I think that would be interesting to have you kind of go back into that time and sort of introduce us into the English world at that time, whether it's through sort of a middle class family, or a family that's struggling to stay in the upper epsilons. I think that would be, because somebody like you could really write that incredibly well. And I think something like that would do really well, because it's almost like a fresh take on history, because nobody's writing in that area and nobody's writing in that era either.
Excellent crime
Yes, you
based,
could.
based in medieval England. And of course, you've
Yeah.
got people like, books like this. Now, here's something that would draw me straight away. First thing I saw it was The Other Boleyn Girl, the
Oh, yeah.
Gregory,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
which
I know the
is
one.
which is not quite history, but
Hmm.
it's based on historical fact, but it's bringing that whole era to life. Now, that sort of thing I
Yes.
really, really enjoy. Yeah.
It's good because it gets your juices flowing.
When I was young, I used to read a lot of Georgette Hare.
Yeah, I remember you saying, yeah. So that
Yeah,
that that is definitely interesting. Has there
yeah.
ever been a book you've picked up and you thought, why did I start this? This is not my cup of tea. This is disaster.
Yes, I was given a school prize once for writing, would you believe?
Oh,
Called
okay.
Lavengro by Borrow. And I never have succeeded in finishing that book.
Oh,
I
jeez.
just thought it was boring past belief. I might have been far too
Ah,
young for it, but I just look at it like I feel the weight on my shoulders. It's just
good
like
one. Good one to kill
plowing through
insomnia then.
people. Pardon?
Yeah, good one to
It's
kill your insomnia with.
no, but it wouldn't even do that because you
Oh
couldn't keep
no.
reading it long enough. It's just tedious, um,
Oh
and
jeez,
I do
that's
feel
never
that.
good to have a book like that. No, I mean I've been there. I've been there with you, and I would have to say I would throw it out the window and just forget it ever existed. Um, and
And
I'm a great believer
occasionally
in
I
not
feel
doing
that way
that. So
about a very violent noir crime novel. I think I read it and then somebody's being dissected in a horrible way in front of you. I mean, I have people who have come to horrible ends, but not usually in front of you. And I mean, it's
yeah,
just
exactly.
gratuitous violence and often sexual violence. And I think I am not going to read this. I wish I'd never touched it. And
Yeah,
people
I
give me crime books because they think I'll like them, and sometimes I really don't. Mm.
just say, give me a historical. You'll be
Yeah,
fine.
yeah.
Just, I think that's the new thing. If they ask you what you want for Christmas, say historical. So we're going into the writing portion of the podcast, and I have to sort of, we're diving into sort of the darker side of your writing. And how did you go about creating those darker characters that kind of created that threat in your stories, that did the murders, that create that darkness and that dark period for your characters?
I'm afraid, like all authors, I think, I just looked in my
Mm-hmm.
head. I think we all have the capacity to be quite evil if we wished to
Yeah,
be.
I think we
Imagine
do,
what it's
and
like. Mm.
it's funny because you say that, and there's I was listening to the crime. There's a podcast called the Crime Daily Daily Podcast, and there was actually an author who is up on charges for writing a story on how to kill her husband, and then her husband suddenly died. He was suddenly murdered,
Right.
and I
Well,
thought, is that not a little bit suspicious?
yeah. Well, there are, of course, and I'm not going to name any names, but anybody who knows the field will probably know who I'm talking about. There are quite
Yeah,
famous authors who are, in fact, murderers.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean no, I mean writers of crime,
Yeah,
not
of course.
fiction.
Yeah.
No, I mean fictional crime, who are in fact authors, who are in fact murderers. So yes,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but I think we all of us have the capacity to think what would happen if I,
Hmm. It's letting
whatever.
our subconsciousness out. Yeah. I agree with that. For me, I actually have to go and set a mood. I have to have specific music and lighting, and I have to just really kind of dig in, and then just let it go, let my mind go. Um, but if I don't, I mean, I'm not able to do that. I find it a bit more difficult to write that stuff and to get into that kind of frame of mind. So, what inspired you to enter into the historical and kind of lend your writing voice to that above all other types of writing? Because you could got into any genre and you would have been fantastic. So, what was it about history more than anything that made you
Well,
want to add your
as
voice
I
to
say,
them?
I think I said before, I think the, listening to my uncle talk about his childhood made me think I want to catch
Yeah,
this before it's gone. And then
yeah.
my agent rang up and asked me if I had a crime short story set in set in Rome. So I wrote one, and I thought, oh, this is interesting. So
It's very gratuitous. Yes, yeah.
yeah,
I
yeah.
must admit, I like that. I do like that. I wish I had an agent that did that for me. To be honest, yeah, that's a dream of mine to have a decent agent that can almost
Mm.
give me a direction sometimes for my writing, because I can sometimes one day be working on a crime book, another day in historical, and I just never know what I'm waking up to write. So yeah, it would be lovely to have somebody that would put me in a good direction. What uh is there a like when you go to create your books and you write your books, is it a movie in your head, or is it a jigsaw puzzle that you're kind of putting together, that you're slotting the pieces together?
I'm not a planner.
Okay.
I
Oh,
have
you're a
an idea.
pantser. That's what it's, yeah.
I
Pantser,
have
yeah.
a general idea what this is about. You know, I
Yeah.
my young lady who's in the Cornish blacksmith's daughter. I have an idea where she's going to end up, and I imagine it's quite clear to everybody where the romance lies, whether it's going to happen or
Yes.
not. In at least one of my books, it didn't work. But
Exactly, yeah.
yeah, thanks to the war. But and the back character in that one, Ellie, is Effie, is is already living with the effects of war. But sorry, I've forgotten the question.
It's
Ask me
okay.
again.
No, it's fine. So when you're putting your story together, is it like a movie or is it a jigsaw puzzle in your
No, no,
head?
no. I'm not a planner. I have a general idea where it's going and what the main theme is, and then I
Yes.
turn on the television in my head and see what happens. But I don't.
Ah,
I and it's very much episodic,
right.
um,
Yes.
particularly in the romances, because it's not a one-person narrative. It's viewed from different people. Because I don't think you ever understand the sometimes how the less attractive characters think unless you see inside their heads. Unless you see the world
Yes, of
through
course.
their eyes. So
Yeah.
so I sort of turn it off and then have another television episode from a slightly different point of view.
And that's really good, I think, because it gives you that sort of wider perspective and that broader perspective, which I quite like. Is there a character that stayed with you the most or the longest that you've written?
Well, obviously, the detective hero of the crime series is, well, he's
Yeah.
not a detective at all. He's a pavement maker, but
Yeah. It solves
he's
all the crime. Yeah.
yeah, yes. Well, he sees patterns. I think that was the idea, and also
Ah.
because he is who he is. He's a tradesman. He's an ex-slave. He has entrance into
Yes.
the high places because he makes pavements for the wealthy.
Yes.
He's a Celt, but he's a Roman citizen,
Ah.
and he has a wealthy
Yeah.
patron. So he can go anywhere and he can talk to anybody because he has links with everything. And not
Yes.
many not many professions would have. So that was a happy accident. But
Hmm.
obviously he's there, and his family run through everything, and his patron and things
Yes.
like that. But in the Cornish ones, there's a hidden secret which I'll let you into. There is a character called Crowdy
Uh
who is
huh.
in every single book, and he's a
Oh.
farmer, and he is just the backbone of everything. And he just drives a
Ah.
cart, and he takes somebody to market, or he gives somebody a lift, or he sells somebody milk, or somebody goes to his house and talks to him. And he's there.
Yeah.
He's in every single book. He's very background. Nobody. He's never in the foreground. He's just there. And
He's
yes,
just there as a support. Yeah.
he's lived with me the longest. And if I'm thinking of a Cornish book, it has to be somebody Crowdy knows.
Yes, because otherwise it doesn't feel
Otherwise,
right.
otherwise
Almost.
not part of the story. No.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get that. I have characters like that all the time, and it drives me spare because they have nothing to do with the series, but they want to pull me back to their own. Is there a character that you wish you could have written more about? Would Crawley be that person?
No, really, I think I'm Crowdy.
Ah, oh, okay.
Except he's a man, of course, and a farmer. But I think
Yeah, yeah.
really, it's his world I'm creating around me. So he's
So
not
you
he's,
don't
he's
think
not an
he?
irritation. He's um yeah. One person I would quite have liked to have developed a bit more and never got much of a chance was somebody who turned up in my first book, who's really a version of my Aunt Neat. Um,
Oh, okay.
and she's the lady who has has to look after the orphans, and
Yes.
who is as hard as nails, but only because
Yeah.
life has made her
She
that
had to
way.
be. Yeah. She
Heart
had
of
to be. Yeah.
gold, adores the baby, but it's tough as old boots. And it's a very
Yes.
Cornish thing, and I'm sure there are people just like that in Shetland. Mm.
Yes. Very much so. We had a few battle axes. Definitely. Yep.
Yeah, yeah,
We actually called
battle
them
axe,
that.
but
Yeah.
actually built on solid gold.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah,
We had a lot
and
of battle axes whose hearts were just a gold and would take in orphan
yeah,
children or
yeah, but
there was
not
so many.
not terribly attractive, but
No.
would but actually in the book she actually risks her life
Yeah.
because
I
she loves the child. Yeah.
yes.
Mm.
I think that's great. I think I would agree. Yeah. I would love to hear more about her as the future goes on. Never know, maybe your publisher will phone after hearing this and say, "Yeah, let's do a story about her." I think maybe you never know, you might
We,
get a call
we
about that.
we do have a slight problem because regional sagas are out of favour. They're not easy to
Yes.
sell. I'm sorry to tell you this because I know you're writing one or a version of it. Regional stuff is not very popular at the moment. Um,
No.
but hang about, it'll come back.
Yeah, it always does. It always does. And I keep that in the back of my head that it might not come out and be popular now, but in 5 years it could change a writer's life, or it could mean something to somebody. And
Yeah.
I don't do this to get rich. I do this just to tell stories, and so that people can have the love of a story, and have a story that might take them away from their own pain and their own hardships and things like that. So, what techniques have you found helpful, and the ones that you wish you hadn't tried during your writing career so far?
Which techniques did you say?
Techniques, writing techniques,
Yeah.
yes.
Um, um, well, I used to be an English language teacher, and
Yes.
I used to train teachers of English to foreign language. And I think a feeling for the rhythm of English, the way English actually puts itself together, has been very helpful to me
Oh, that's
because
good.
uh, one of the things is different people speak differently, and
Yes.
I mean, I used to do a bit of acting as well, and you
So did
can't
I,
have
yeah.
the same. Yeah, I think that helps enormously because You've got to get into somebody's voice. And you read an awful lot of, I mean, if you read other people's manuscripts when they're trying to get published, a lot of people, everybody sounds like the author.
Yes.
And you can't hear the different rhythms and the different voice and the different choice of words that
Yeah.
people naturally make when they're just different. Because some people are more influenced by what they see, and other people are into sounds, and if you just do that, you
Hmm.
have somebody who says, yes, I see, and somebody else says, yes, I hear what you're saying. You've immediately got different kinds of people, and if you keep that in
Yes.
your head, you can keep the balls in the air. What doesn't work for me ever is what we were talking about before, being the eye of God and seeing everybody. I can't
Hmm.
do it. I can only be
No.
one person at a time.
I know
And
that feeling,
everybody
and
has
I
both
can only be
ways
one as
to
well. Yeah.
rhyme is different. Sorry?
I know exactly how that feels, and I cannot change it. I can't be anybody that's different. I struggle so much with leaving one person's head. Like I've just learned how to do the Mills and Boone technique, and it is so difficult because you're head hopping, and I've never head hopped before, and it's such an odd writing style for me. It almost feels completely alien and strange.
Don't much
And
like to read it either.
no, I find it difficult, and there's so many authors that do it, and I love them, and I love their books, but sometimes, yeah, I find that very, very difficult. I've got Shirley Cannon coming on, who's a best-selling adult fantasy author from America, and it's the same thing. Like, I'm just so narrow. Like, I love how she does it, but I can't copy that style. Um, and I'm trying at the moment for obviously
I
Mills
mean,
and Boone because I've been
I
given a
think what
chance. But
what we're both saying is that there are some things that suit your.
yes,
If you tend to work from inside, then
hmm,
that's what you have to do. If you can work, you're going to work from
yes,
out. I mean, probably these people are also planners.
yeah.
They
I'm
know
a
where it's
plotter
going.
too, so yeah, I have to plot. I have
Yeah.
to plot or I
I
lose it.
mean,
But this
I'm not
is,
a planner. And I sometimes try to make my characters do something, and they say, "You what?
no,
I wouldn't do
yep,
that."
yep.
So
But
you
I
can't.
admit this book I'm doing here called Ride with Me for Mills and Boone is a pantser because I had plotted the book and I had detailed the book down really well. And my husband laid away a notebook because we were moving house and he somehow lost it. And I can't find it, and neither can he. So I lost the entire book. And now I'm kind of almost pantsing it because I cannot remember all of it. So I'm just sort of going with the characters and going with the story and praying that when I get to the end that it's what I set out to write and it's not completely and utterly different. But I have constantly the in my mind I have constantly the outline of and the rules of Mills and Boone there guiding me and sort of keeping me entrapped within their limits. I hope that the story's great and it's wonderful, and it's uplifting and it's romantic and it's everything they want. But at the same time, I just want to see how it turns out now because it is my first pantser in over 15 years. It's 15, 16 years since I started writing plot style. So yeah, I'm very nervous. Very, 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 very nervous to see how it
Good luck
turns
with
out.
it. Good luck with it. I'm. People say to me, "Oh, you must have a plan," and in a sense, I do. But I
Yeah,
can't
you have
think
an
this.
outline.
I mean, I have an idea. Obviously, when somebody dies, I have an idea who killed them and why.
Yeah, yeah, you have
but
an outline
um,
in your head. Yeah.
but how you get from finding the corpse to finding that out, that's just.
Hmm.
I just have to watch what Lybotus does and how he troubles about and falls over things, and he doesn't
Yeah,
necessarily always
exactly.
work it out. It's just because that's not the nature of society. He
Yes, I would.
doesn't have data at his fingertips. He just has to deal with what he can come across.
and the
Mm.
patterns he sees. Yeah, of course.
Mm.
I get that. I get that very well.
Mm.
So moving into your life. Okay, this is the part that everyone wants to know because they want to know what we're like behind the scenes. Because we almost have a front that we present to our readers, and that is the writer image. And it's the image that publishers have created over years and years and years. So we're going to really sort of explore that and explore who we are in this next segment. So, what's the first thing you do when you need to just walk away and de-stress from writing and editing in your life? What's your go-to to absolutely just go and just fully relax?
I'm going to sound terrible, but it's the other way around. Writing is my
I know.
escape.
I knew
Writing,
you were going to say that because I remembered that from last time, and I'm like, I know it's such a weird question for you, but writing is your escape, is it not?
writing,
It's like the best ticket for you.
yes, it is. I I'm not amazingly well, like yourself, really, and my
Yeah.
husband is very far from well, and I have a lot of quite difficult jobs to do and things to see to and
Yes.
worries, and I can
Yeah.
just escape. I just come in and for an hour I'm doing something else. I'm somewhere else.
Yeah. You've taken a ticket and you've gone to explore a new world.
Mm.
Yeah. I like that too. And for me, writing is my escape when I'm stuck in the hospital. And this is what drives doctors mad because they don't believe I'm sick if they see me writing.
Mm.
But for me, it's if I'm scared or if I'm dealing with something that is too much for me, to be able to write and be a different character for an hour or 2 hours or however long they leave me alone for, that's golden.
Mm.
And I suffer
And
terrible PTSD, and it's almost like I can step away from the PTSD and it can't touch me anymore. It can't torture me anymore. And I can be in that other person's head just for a little while and just be safe from all that drama and trauma that I've gone through myself.
mm, exactly right. And sometimes if you're physically uncomfortable, I mean, if my back is bad or something like that, I had a really bad accident when I was 47, and I've been
Yes.
had problems ever since. And I've got plates in my back and stupid stuff like that. And sometimes if it's really bad, I can forget. I
Yeah,
couldn't
you
do
can.
anything else, but I can sit, and because my brain is occupied, I can forget.
Yeah. And it's
So
super important for people with long term health illnesses to be able to do that because it doesn't get any better for us. Sometimes, you know, a bad day is a bad day, but you need that way of distracting and self soothing and trying to live to your very best, even within your restrictions. What hobbies do you enjoy and ones that you wish you could explore if you had the time?
I'm quite a keen knitter. I do a lot of knitting.
I know that feeling. Yes.
I used to do a lot more when the children were young. I
Hmm.
didn't do it for a long time because I've got very arthritic fingers, but I started doing it again during
Yeah.
lockdown. It's been very good for my fingers. And because my fingers are a bit more mobile than they were, I started playing the piano again, and I wish I could do more of
Oh
that.
wow. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
hopeless. I'm not good. Believe me, I'm not good. And I play the
I can't play
handbell.
at all, so you're doing better than I am. I can't
Well,
play a
I
single
used to
tune.
play when I was young, and then I hadn't touched it for 50 years. I have a piano, but my kids played it,
Ah,
and I just carried it around
yeah.
with me, and I played two fingers. But I started playing again, and I must be all grade three by now. But yeah, it's
Hey,
pleasure.
as long as you're doing it, that's the thing. Like, you put that practice in, you'd be surprised how far you can come.
Yeah, and
That's what I say everyone.
I play the handbells, and I started
Ah,
doing that a couple of years ago too. And I would like what I'd like to do more of is painting, but I don't really have
yes.
time. Mm,
I would
mm,
I would like to be able to learn to paint out with paint by numbers, but
mm.
I don't think I'll ever have the confidence to do that. I think till I'm a lot older. But because my grandfather was a professional painter and he was such a fantastic painter. Um, and I
My
kind
mother,
of wish I had his
my
skills.
mother was an artist, so yes. So
And
it's
you almost feel like you're letting them down if you can't do it as good as them.
Yes, they're
Um,
absolutely right. That's the trouble. When you're surrounded by people
yeah,
who are much better than you are, it's very, very difficult. But I would like to be able to do it a bit more. Yeah.
and I must admit that it's weird because a lot of the teachings that he used to yell at me about, oil painting was his thing. Um, I sort of picked up on, and they kind of stuck in my brain. So even if it is paint by numbers, I kind of go out of my way to kind of make sure that it's the way he would do it, and it was, it's built the way that he would do it. And so many people say to me, oh my goodness, how do you do that? Um, because it is totally different. And I say, well, it doesn't look like a paint by numbers. And I go, because I build up the color and I make sure you can't see the lines and the numbers. And I'm very, very diligent about that. And I says, I think that's because I've got my grandfather's voice in my head telling me to do that. And they always laugh at me and say, oh, stop being bashful and humble and whatnot. But it's true because, I learned so much from him.
I'm a bit more sort of splash it on and see what happens, sort of thing. But yes,
Oh,
no,
you're more contemporary, right?
no,
Okay,
no, no, no,
yeah,
no, 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 no. I'd love to be able to paint seascapes and things, but it's
yeah,
definitely sort of trying to use washes and things. That's what I'd like to be able to do. Mm.
yeah. No, I mean, I would love to paint the way he did. And maybe one day I will get that skill level because if I'm spending a lot of time with my children or whatever, I might get to that point. But at the moment, it's not possible. I myself have a long term illness that makes me slow down and appreciate the day. What would you say makes you sort of smell the roses and enjoy the day?
Literally doing that, I suppose. I've got a goldfish pond in my garden, and every
Yeah.
so often I go down and feed the fish and just enjoy the garden. It's not a wonderful garden, it's on a
Mm.
cliff, but it's full of shrubs and it's in the spring,
Oh,
it's
that's
very beautiful and calm.
beautiful. Yeah.
It's lovely. Yeah. And I do like flowers that smell. So I grow
Yeah.
lily of the valley and roses and stock. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm out there. The trouble is I've had COVID and I can't smell anything at the moment, so it's a bit
Oh
not as nice as
no.
it sometimes is. But yeah. Mm.
So you got caught with COVID too?
Pardon?
So you got caught with the COVID as well then? Was it somebody that
Yeah,
brought it into your house or?
I was quite poorly with COVID, and I still haven't got my taste back properly or anything. But no,
It is awful, yeah.
that really is horrid.
It
But
is. It is.
I'm still here.
At least, at least you're here. Yes, that's an upside. I'll give you that. I'm terrified of catching it. I've not had it yet, and I do worry about it. But I think I worry about it more because the doctors have made it into a thing that I feel like I have to worry about it. And I don't think that I
Well,
would have worried
I don't
about it if they
recommend it.
hadn't made
I
a big deal
really
of
don't
it.
recommend it. I was very poorly. Mm,
Yeah, yeah. Well,
mm,
fingers crossed. I actually have to go for my booster at some point,
mm.
and I've forgotten to book it again. But I'll get
Oh,
there. I'll get
please,
there.
please don't, because I'm regarded as highly vulnerable because I have a chest disease,
Same.
and
Yeah.
that I had it the second day it was out, and if I hadn't had all the injections and the second booster, I would be dead.
Right. Well,
So,
I've had five. I've had five. Because I don't hold on
mm,
to immunity,
mm, mm,
and I've never held on to immunity like chicken pox and things like that. Normal people had on to that. I don't. So I keep getting it essentially. So when my kids have chicken pox, mummy's going to have chicken pox too, and usually it's very severe when I get it.
mm,
Um, so they're concerned that my body isn't going to hold on to the immunity at all,
mm,
so that
mm,
I will always be high risk.
mm,
Um, and they say they don't really know how it's going to affect me until I get it. And that kind of terrifies me a little bit.
mm,
And my husband and me, we can't just book it through the NHS now. We have to find a chemist to do it. And that makes me uncomfortable a little bit because I'm like,
uh,
not sure about this. But yeah, we are trying to sort of organize it. It's just trying to get it on a day that he's not working so he can take me and then take care of me afterwards because I'm always ill with it.
uh,
Um, is going to be the trick. But we will do it. We will do it. I promise. We will get there eventually. It's just a long road. So where's your favorite place to curl up at the end of the day and just read? Do you have a spot in the garden or a reader's nook or somewhere nice to just go and curl up with that book?
Don't really have one. It's
Oh,
not life isn't like that very much at the moment. I tend
yeah,
to be slightly on duty when I'm not in here, and I'm going to have to
yeah.
be in a minute.
So just finishing off the podcast, we always have the word game,
Yeah.
and I believe we're doing word association. Is that right
Yep,
for the
that'll
word
do.
game?
Yeah.
Right. So I'm going to say a word, and you can tell me what the first word or first book that comes to your mind,
Right.
and let's have some fun with it. I actually gave you a theme, so maybe by the end you can let me know if you've figured out the theme. So the first word is kittens.
Yes. um, Last time you asked me that question, I came up with quite a different answer, but the first thing that came into my head this time was a book by, of all people, Enid Blyton, called
Oh,
Bimbo and Topsy, which was given to me when I went to New Zealand when I was 7 by my school teacher as a farewell present.
wow. I like that. That is awesome. Okay, knitting needles.
Madame Defarge.
Oh, I like that one. Yes, I really do. Balls of wool.
Well, it really has to be either Madame Defarge or having Easter with my children, because when I was young and I was a single mum, we didn't have a lot of money, and the kids next door had huge Easter eggs, and we only had little ones. So I used to do a big maze with knitting wool all around the stairs,
Oh,
and you had to roll up your ball of wool and find your Easter egg. So it became a big game.
oh, I love
And
that. That is so
they
much
do
more
it with their
fun.
children. So, yeah.
You were ahead of the game. Yeah, I love that. What
Yeah.
about patterns? And what I mean by patterns is like patterns for knitting, patterns for sewing, patterns for making dresses.
Yeah, well, of course, I write about a mosaicist, so the first thing I think of is mosaics.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
What about basket?
Kittens.
It's a tricky one.
Because I had a kitten, and when my little kitten was very small, we're talking 40 years ago, it used to
Yes.
get into the washing basket and pretend to be a lion and put its paws through the. Used to turn it over on
Oh
top.
yeah, mine does that. Yeah,
Yeah,
I've got a cat that does that. He thinks he's
yeah,
so. Oh, I hate it because he always catches me.
yeah.
Fresh bread. It's a tricky one, isn't it?
No, the first thing that comes into my head, and it's not a book at all, it's just France.
Ah, I love that answer. We'll go with that answer because I think that one's the best answer. So newborns cry.
um,
What do you think of when you hear a newborn crying?
uh, well, of course, when you have had a newborn, it would have to be my own little son and daughter, I guess.
Oh, I love that. I think
Um,
that's so sweet.
I tell you what else, it's something that's just come into my mind. I was once at a nativity service, and they had a real
Oh,
baby,
that's beautiful.
and that was just so lovely. You're so
You don't
used to
get
the
that anymore.
no.
Yeah.
And
Oh.
the mother just had the real baby, and it was just, and the baby just went, and it was just fantastic.
Oh, it was destiny. Yeah, I love that. Oh, you made me all gushy now. Well, that's it for the podcast this week, guys. And I am so honored to have had you on, really and truly. And I cannot wait to send you the Shetland Royals. And you'll have to come back on when you get another book ready for release, and we'll have another chat and maybe a bit deeper chat about what you've been writing about. But truly, guys, this has been an absolute honor for me, and I think we fly the banner high for historical and British writing, and I hope we continue to do that for many years to come. And again, thank you so much for joining us. And next week, we're going to have an exceedingly interesting guest. You're just going to have to wait and see who it is. So, see you all again next week.